Hi guys, Cameron Walker, your favorite Huntsville realtor here with Amanda Howard, Sotheby's International Realty. Today we're going to talk about inflation, its impact on the Huntsville economy, mortgage rates, the local housing market, and find out whether or not wages are keeping up. So let's dive in. First, let's define what inflation is. Most of you probably already know, but just in case. Inflation is the term given to the rise in cost of goods over time. The Fed tracks this as a rate, and they have a target rate of 2%. Over the last year, inflation's really well exceeded that, getting up as high as 8%. So the Fed's stepping in to reduce the inflation rate. One of their major tools they use is increasing their interest rate, which trickles out through the economy and usually leads to an increase in mortgage interest rates. So what we're seeing today is mortgage interest rates are right around 6% for a 30-year fixed rate, whereas last year, at the end of last year, you could pretty easily find a mortgage interest rate of around 3%. So they've doubled in 6 to 8 months. As you can imagine, this is having an impact on the affordability of homes for buyers. And a way to illustrate this is think about a 1% increase in a mortgage interest rate typically has about a 10% decrease on your purchasing power. So to illustrate this, I went out to a mortgage calculator and I pulled this up using today's mortgage interest rates of 6%. I used a $400,000 loan, which is fairly typical for the area. You're looking at a payment of about $2,400. Now let's say you went to buy a house at some point in the future and interest rates have gone up to 7%. If you were looking to keep that same $2,400 payment, you'd have to buy a 10% less house at $360,000 in order to keep that payment right around $2,400. Now let's say you decided to buy the same house at $400,000 in the future at that 7% interest rate, you'd be looking at a payment difference of about $260. And that equates to a little over $3,100 a year. So as you can imagine, this increase in interest rate and thus payment has really impacted buyers' affordability, which has a trickle-down effect to the local housing market. So let's talk about that too. We've definitely seen a cooling off in the housing market. It's not a crash or anything like that, but homes that used to sell in a day, 2-3 days with 10 plus offers, those homes are now selling in 3 to 4 weeks, and they may only have 2 or 3 offers on them. Depending on where they are, the condition, age of the home, it may still sell very quickly. But most homes are sitting out there 2, 3, 4 weeks. Sellers have gotten ahead of pricing in the market. We used to price homes based on comparables and say, okay, you fall within this range, let's put your house on the market there. Over the last few years, we've been able to go to the top of the comparables, add 5 to 10% on there for the seller to get the number they want, and they were still getting multiple offers over asking price. Those days are really gone. So now sellers are having to be more accommodating to buyers. They're offering more favorable terms, more favorable conditions like closing costs, things of that nature, and they're having to be more willing to negotiate on price. We've also seen a near doubling of the inventory in the market. While I welcome the new inventory, I'm not happy that it's because of the mortgage interest rate increase. But it's also a little misleading. I know a lot of realtors out there are crowing about how many homes are on the market and this and that. Really, this is the vast majority of these homes are new construction. Builders usually plan out their builds anywhere from 12 to 24 months in advance. They have to buy the land, they have to get it permitted, bring in the utilities, all of that, order lumber, line up labor. So these were homes that were already going to be built, but builders during the last couple of years took advantage of the market and created artificial scarcity. They might have 12 homes under construction and only release 2 or 3 to the market at a time so that people didn't get the impression that there was more room to negotiate because there were more homes available. Well, as the rates have gone up, these builders have seen the writing on the wall and they've released all that inventory. So those other 8 or 9 homes that would have been held back in the past, they're all out on the market now. So there's immediately available homes, but there's homes 6 to 8 months out that are all on the market. And this has created this illusion that there's so much more inventory. There is more inventory on the MLS. But those were homes that were already under construction to begin with. That said, the builders are getting much more flexible with their terms. I've actually seen some base price decreases recently. I've seen decreases in option price like bump outs, expansions, granite countertops, islands, things like that. And I'm also seeing builders increase their closing cost incentive or even offer to do rate buy downs for the clients that are purchasing their homes. So there's a lot of opportunity out in the market while the builders are working their way through this existing inventory they already have in the ground. Now what they're going to do next year once that inventory is sold off, they're probably going to slow down their build. I don't know that the incentives will be as high as they are right now. Really depends on how the market reacts. So we've talked a little bit about what is inflation, what's the impact on the interest rates, and how's that impacting the local housing market. Let's talk about the economy. Huntsville's still a booming economy. We're still seeing a lot of direct investment from the federal government, state level, and local. We're seeing a lot of private investment too. whether it's opening new event venues like the Ryan Amphitheater, new businesses coming to town, be they chain or local businesses. We're seeing a ton of business formation, and we're seeing quite a bit of hiring. Matter of fact, I checked the jobs board, which I do periodically before I shot this video, and if you look at Indeed, one of the largest job boards out there are over 14,700 jobs available in the Huntsville market. So there's still a high demand, and it doesn't matter if you're working in aerospace, IT, software dev, if you're working in the hospitalities industry, if you're working in service or professional services, healthcare, teachers, we need it all. There's so much expansion and growth here. And quite frankly, inflation may actually add fuel to that fire. Part of Huntsville's rapid growth, a lot of it's attributed to the space and manufacturing industries, but some of it is due to tax code changes across the country. Several years ago, the tax codes were changed so that people couldn't write off as many as their state and local deductions, and it made it more expensive for them to live in higher cost of living areas. Whereas when you move to Alabama, and Huntsville specifically, you're in a lower cost of living area, but with a high quality of life. Now, I'm not going to go into all that. I've already shot a video on it. I'll link it here for you. But the net effect was people moved out of those higher cost of living areas and into these lower cost of living areas. And I think inflation is going to have the same thing. When you think about inflation as a rate, depending on what it costs to live where you are, if it costs half as much to live in Alabama, well, then your costs are only going up by half as much again because of the nature of how rates work, right? So if you're in California, Northern Virginia, Dallas-Fort Worth area, New York, and that inflation rate, you're already at a really high base, and it's taking you up from there. Versus if you're in Huntsville, Alabama, you're at a very low base, and you're just going up incrementally. So anyway, I think that's going to add some fuel to the fire for economic growth because more businesses, government entities are want to build here because of the lower baseline to start from. All right. So if we got more job openings, how are the wages keeping up? So I read through a couple of articles prior to making this video, and AL.com had a really interesting one where they went out to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics and pulled the numbers for the last 3 years. So they looked at from June of 2019 to June of 22 and saw, okay, what was the average wage increase for Huntsville? It was actually 25%. That is a huge number. That means people are making, 25% more over the last 3 years than what they were making previously in the Huntsville area. And inflation's been nowhere near that number. So if you look at it on a 3-year basis, we have far outpaced inflation. We're 3 times what inflation's been here recently, but even higher if you average it out over the 3 years. Now, I took another look at a Huntsville Business Journal, and they looked at a more narrow focus of really since January. In that time frame, Huntsville wages have increased about 5%. On a non-adjusted basis. But inflation's been higher than that number. So if you actually look at it over the last, say, 8 months, there's actually inflation has eaten into some of those gains that people have gotten, and it's a little bit negative for us on an adjusted basis. So I do think Huntsville employers are going to have to start increasing wages again to keep up with the pace of inflation. But that said, if you look at it a little bit longer term, we're way ahead of where we could be, and we're way ahead of inflation. All right, I hope this is helpful for you, keep you in the loop of what's going on economically in the Huntsville area. If you found this helpful, subscribe to my channel, like this video so other people can find it. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thanks.